Hello! We've been working very hard and managed to finally finish our very first add-on called Step Motion. It allows you to create stop motion style animation within Blender. Here's how to use it. First off, let's start off with opening the Step Motion folder and going into the Blender files and opening the actual Step Motion Blender file. Then we have to make sure that the Step Motion add-on is installed by going into Edit, Preferences and press Install. And after this, the Step Motion will show up in the Navigation tab and we're ready to set up. Start by pressing the Create Step Motion to initiate the Step Motion folder structure, and then we can click on the Step Motion Preview object and make sure to set the frames collection to frames, and we're all set. I now want to quickly show what you can do with Step Motion. First off, New Frame. New Frame creates a frame with a sphere in it. Feel free to delete or add it to your needs. Duplicate Frame creates a copy of your currently selected frame. You can also press Ctrl-Shift-N for a new frame or Ctrl-Shift-D for a duplicate frame. Maybe you've made an object outside of Step Motion. In that case, if you select that object and press Add Object, it will move it to the frames collection and rename it accordingly. Next up is Set Position. This is important to press if you move the frame in your scene, so the Step Motion Preview shows the movement correctly. You can do this on multiple frames at the same time as long as they are selected. If we now press play, the Step Motion Preview object will actually show the motion. That was the Create tab. Now for the Visibility tab, we can change the mode for every frame by changing it to Sculpt or Object mode. If you click and drag in the frame box, you're able to step through all the frames to your collection. You can also do this by scrolling whilst hovering over this box, pressing the arrow keys underneath, or pressing Ctrl and using the keyboard arrow keys. For the onion skinning and frame visibility boxes, make sure you're not in animation playback mode to use them. Onion skinning turns on or off onion skinning, obviously, and frame visibility only makes a selected frame visible. And this can be super handy if you want to see your motion in little steps. The Export tab allows you to export Alembic files of your motion. Make sure to set the frames you want to export and press the Step Motion Preview object. And then you have to make sure Realize Instances is flipped on and press Export ABC. It will be exported to your Blender's file location. Finish Step Motion resets your entire Step Motion and allows you to create another one. Make sure the Step Motion Preview object is set to the right collection or make a duplicate. Now for the Step Motion Preview, it shows your frames in animation from the selected collection. FPS changes how fast it goes through all your frames or how slow. Use material, make sure that the material underneath is shown on all of your frames. If you don't want this, flip this off and it will show all the different materials that you have selected for every single frame. Loop does what it says on the tin, it loops your animation, and turning this off will start manual animation. As you can see, we can now scroll through the keyframes box to see our animation, and this allows us that you can set your own keyframes throughout to create your custom animation. Maybe you want to show some frames to show multiple times, or you don't want it to loop, and you do this by manually inserting keyframes. Pressing loop again will go back to looping and ignore your keyframes. Realize Instances is by default turned off. Make sure it's only turned on when you want to export an Alembic. By default, all your frames will have the Step Motion Clay shader applied. You can do very basic things within this shader like displacement, color and scaling, but most importantly, it also animates. You can change the speed of this animation by changing the frame step value. The lower the value, the higher the speed, and setting this to 0 will turn the animation off. Now for some extra notes. In this case, maybe you have an object that you gave specific multiple materials. When we now press Add Object to add it to our Step Motion, it will lose all those materials to make use of the onion skinning materials, and it will replace it with the clay shader, which is correct. But when Finish Step Motion is pressed, we can see that some of our materials have been lost. We can bring them back by pressing one of our frames and adding back our previously created materials. Just make sure they are in the same order as before. Now when we uncheck Use Materials in our Step Motion Preview object, we can now see that it correctly shows our materials. Because we're using instances of our frames, the animation playback is actually pretty lightweight, allowing you to make combinations of your animations. Feel free to duplicate the Step Motion Preview object, and you can give them different positions and rotations, combine them together, and you could even offset their speeds to create more variation. That was all for the tutorial. I hope everything is very clear, and if not, feel free to contact us. We're very, very excited to see what you all will create with Step Motion. Bye bye.